At the New Indian, we have with us N Sathiya Moorthy. He is a political commentator and analyst. He has been former director of ORF Chennai. He spent a lot of his time in Sri Lanka understanding Sri Lanka's internal politics as well as geopolitics. Welcome to Reason, the New Indians platform where we get to the issues and the reason behind those issues concerning you. Mr. Moorthy, I will begin obviously with the current status in Sri Lanka. We are seeing massive protests against Rajapaksha. What exactly is happening? What has happened in Sri Lanka?
There are multiple factors. Number one, as you know, is the economic crisis. Number two, the mismanagement of the economy by the President Gotabaya Rajapaksha in particular. But that is the visible thing. But the Sri Lankan economy has been this way for the past 40, 50, 60 years, and no one wanted to give a corrective route. It is not easy because for neighborhood nations around India, none of them can be economically viable units. But they are also living in the 21st century world or the 20th century world where consumerism took over and the governments could not, in a democracy, resist that temptation. So people's aspirations and the government's politicians' ambitions coalesce to create such a situation. I won't say Gotabaya Rajapaksha or the Rajapaksas are fall guys. They added their own might to an already failing economy and they took the blame. This is one part of it. Of course, politically, the other aspect, the Rajapaksas are said to be tyrants or despots or autocratic, all you can say, some of which is definitely true. But the system itself has been like this. There are very few presidents in Sri Lanka who haven't faced such charges. Right now, we have to understand two or three factors. The collapse of the economy under the Rajapaksas definitely led to a mass protest, which was very, very justifiable. For reasons obviously, no food, no fuel, no medicines, all of them have to be imported. And the country did not have the forex. But there the factors were multiple. One is 2019 Easter bombing, and that stopped the tourists. And then the COVID pandemic, global shutdown. That meant their export products were also not going out, and forex crisis happened, and this government did not do anything about it. Domestically, this Gota government did two major factors. Overnight switched to organic farming, what I would call a quixotic way of doing it, without preparation, without notification. That was a colossal disaster, COVID-related issues to every rural home. Then, before the elections in 2020, parliamentary elections, he removed taxes for a lot of people, mainly rich benefited from it. And there was a loss of 25% of the government revenue. Add to that the COVID loss of income and all that, it became a big hit. Three, over the last 6 months or so, the government was printing money in tons just to keep the local economy going. That gave rise to huge inflation. See, these are the immediate factors. This is not just a people's movement as is commonly understood. It started off as a moderate movement in urban centers, but the forgotten left militant groups, they took charge and took control of what was a peaceful movement of urban middle class in fact, who were in Colombo, who were basically anti-Rajapaksa by conviction and upbringing. So it is that group of protesters from rural Sri Lanka or semi-urban or urban Sri Lanka who are ideologically tuned, who are now in control of the protest.
You're saying that the situation was ripe even before the Rajapaksas came to power. You're hinting that Sri Lanka had several issues, several problems even before they took over, and the problem is not entirely their causing, and it's not they who are fully responsible for it. Is that right?
Yeah, they alone are not responsible. See, but they were in power for the past 15 of the past nearly 20 years or 22
Yes.
years. They had all the time to correct it. That also they did not do. In between, just before Gotabaya became president in 2019, you had a anti-Rajapaksa, non-Rajapaksa government for 4.5 to 5 years. They did not do anything. As it turned out, they were involved in huge scams, what is called the central bank bond scam. Then they were the ones who handed over the Hambantota port territory to the Chinese. They gave away the territory for 99 long years. One other thing neither of them did is, this has nothing to do with what we call or believe as Chinese debt trap. Whether it is debt trap or not, they were all white elephant projects, huge infrastructure projects that did not earn revenue, that did not create jobs for Sri Lankans, that did not bring in huge revenue for the government or family incomes. The previous government also did not apply correctives to it. Still, they also blamed the Rajapaksas for taking money from China, but they continued to borrow money from China for the similar infrastructure projects.
So you are saying that successive governments in Sri Lanka relied on China. They took help from China, and it's not just Rajapaksas who are seen as the stooges of China.
It started mainly with Rajapaksas, Mahinda Rajapaksa's term from 2005. Prior to that, they were getting money from elsewhere. As I said, they are not economically viable governments, and they couldn't control the expenses.
So are you saying that Sri Lanka as an independent sovereign is not a viable option to begin with? It never was, but now they have come to a point where this realization may dawn upon them that they cannot live or exist as an independent sovereign?
No. I'm not saying that. I'm also not saying that they have come to understand it as such. No, it is my reading of the situation. The thing is, they have to tight belt. If they had tightened their belt a little earlier, say 20, 30, 40 years back. So it's basically a structural defect that no one wanted to address and no one addressed.
So tell me, why did Gotabaya Rajapaksa flee Sri Lanka? Why didn't he resign?
I'm not sure. We will come to know in the coming days whether he has not submitted the resignation or not before leaving. I don't think he can fax a resignation and expect the speaker to accept it, because that I don't think the constitution has provision for a faxed resignation, though it may not be explicit otherwise. That is one thing. Two, public protest has definitely overturned this government, and Gota did not feel safe in the country. You see what is happening the last 1 week. Every government building is being occupied by the protesters. Today, when President Gota appointed Prime Minister Ranil as acting president, imposed emergency across the country and curfew in the capital district, Colombo, and the adjoining parts of Western province. Still, protests have continued. These protesters went and occupied the Prime Minister's office. So, who is in control? I don't think Gotabaya Rajapaksa would want to stay there and feel safe. If nothing else, physically he would want to feel safe. So he has left. That is how I see.
And why do you think Singapore or Maldives are the safest destinations for Rajapaksas? Why has Nasheed facilitated their refuge in Maldives?
See, Maldives is only a transit point. I would think Singapore is also a transit point. So we will get to know what the final destination is only after it happens.
Oh, so you're saying that there is a final destination. It could be even, can we suspect it to be Beijing or Europe or US?
From Singapore, flights go everywhere across the world.
And do you think SLPP will have any credibility in the coming presidential elections on July 20th?
The July 20th election is only a parliamentary, parliament elects. And SLPP still has a majority. That is Rajapaksa's party still has an absolute majority. There is no report of the party splitting. So as things stand, the candidate they support becomes president.
There are a lot of speculations that Sajid Premadasa might be the next prime minister of the country. Kura Jayasuriya might be the president, and he might come out as the winner. What are you hearing?
There was a speculation, all right, but already SJP, that is the party of Sajid Premadasa, has announced he will be their presidential candidate. They just don't have the numbers against the SLPP. So unless they are able to split the SLPP, he is not becoming president.
So how do you think politics unfolding in Sri Lanka in the next week or so?
See, next week is going to be very crucial for Sri Lanka for more reasons than one. The protesters, as I said, the left-leaning militant parties, they are very clearly sort of boasting that we did it. Outside the constitution, outside parliament, outside what the democratic norms is. So we will do it again. In fact, just now in the evening, there was a report that the protesters were marching towards parliament. Remember, they have already captured the house, president's residence, prime minister's office, president's secretariat. Now they are moving towards parliament. What you hear typically in a revolution, call it Orange Revolution or Arab Spring or the traditional leftist revolution in revolutions of the previous century in many countries across Europe and Asia or Africa. What they are going to do, what the security persons are authorized to do, going to do is a different thing altogether. They tried to protest, they used water cannon, they used tear gas. They did not go anything beyond that. There may be various reasons, political, social, personal, all those things. But if the protesters do not yield, what next? Other than saying, just as through mass movement we change the government, through mass movement, through mass discussion from village levels upwards, we will create a political philosophy, ideology, policy suited to this country and make parliament to accept and government to implement it.
So they are not clear.
Going to achieve it, how the government existing or new is going to control the situation in the next week is what will decide, one, if Sri Lanka is going to be as peaceful within quotes as it is today, or will anarchy rule? And the West will blame the armed forces and others for the failure.
You are consistently hinting that it is not only a structural failure or an economic failure in Sri Lanka, but also a political failure. Are you also seeing a hand of the Western powers, or a lot of people have been saying that the West has been behind the Orange Revolution, the Arab Spring, and many other so-called people's movements? Are you seeing some external interference in Sri Lanka?
See, first, let me clarify. I did not say political structure reforms. I suggest it is what a section of the protesters, left-leaning protesters, they are saying. Whether I share that view or not is a different thing. See, only last week, a day before this protest started, the US ambassador to Sri Lanka, a new lady who came in about 2 months back, she said the speculation that others are behind this movement and all that is wrong and one thing. But you have to remember one thing. Every time there was a police action, where it was opening tear gas or it's army personnel shooting at the protesters who were trying to set fire to a fuel tank stopped on a railway track, they immediately issued a statement. UN, UNHRC, US, whoever is matters in international politics issued statements condemning the act. But when Ranil Wickremesinghe, he is said to be their blue-eyed boy. That was one of the reasons Gota brought him as Prime Minister. His house was burned down last Saturday.
Yes.
And as I said, 78 politicians' homes were burned down on May 9. Till date, no Western leader or government has condemned that. What do you read between the lines from that? I don't say they are backing it, but they are not stopping it.
Can Sri Lanka be helped by IMF or World Bank? If yes, how can they help Sri Lanka? And how much help has come from these institutions?
See, not much has come from this institution. World Bank, for instance, they were already allotted some fund for some other projects. They have permitted it to be diverted, I think about 300 or 350 million, diverted it to be used for the current crisis to manage. And IMF, even at the best of times, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, who was also its finance minister, said they have asked for $6 billion. Going by the current rate of expenses, that can take Sri Lanka for another 6 months. It is what the IMF conditionalities mean for Sri Lanka and ordinary Sri Lankans. As Prime Minister Ranil said, a consortium of Sri Lanka, 8 Sri Lanka consortium consists of members from other countries and all that. Interestingly, after saying this, when he took over as Prime Minister on May 12th, about less than a month back, Prime Minister Ranil said that I am looking at a Asia consortium of India, China, and Japan. I don't know what happened to his original idea. There again, that's a gray area because, let us be honest, other than India, no other country has put in money.
Yes.
They are offered only words. They are not clear-cut words. Yes, we are going to help. In fact, immediately after Ranil became Prime Minister, the Chinese and American envoys met for the first time, possibly anywhere in the world in recent times, to say we will work together to cooperate and all that. Nothing has come out of it. Everyone, including Sri Lankans, have forgotten it.
Oh, well, you're right that India is walking the talk. India is actually sending aid and fulfilling all its commitments towards Sri Lanka. Is there anything else that India can do to rescue people in Sri Lanka? Do you think India can offer something more than what it has already been doing for Sri Lankans?
See, first, there has to be political stability for India or anyone to know whom they have to talk to. See, for instance, on May 9, this protest happened, the so-called struggle and victory, etc. India has, had sent 40,000 tons of chemical fertilizers. The next day, the Indian High Commissioner had to go and hand it over to the Agriculture Minister in his office, right? The
Yes.
thing is, whom else? Now there is a lame duck government, as they say in the US, right? So any serious discussion can happen only when there is a government with which India and others can work. That is what our External Affairs Minister Jaishankar has been repeating, right? But if that happens, if there is no other aid consortium coming up, maybe India has to take the initiative, if not the lead, to put together a new kind of consortium of Asia, Southeast Asia, and West Asia. I mean, South Asia, I mean, India, China, Japan, if interested, China can join or they can deal with Sri Lanka separately. Southeast Asia and West Asia, they can form a consortium and try to do what they can or think about. India cannot be seen as taking the lead because the protesters I talked about, the left-leaning, they are patently anti-Indian.
Okay.
So India has to initiate it, but it has to be seen as coming from someone else.
Are there any leaders in Sri Lanka at the moment behind whom India can actually rally or show its support?
See, I think India has learned, India knows Sri Lanka better than many of us think. India will not get involved in that kind of domestic politics. As you see in the last 5 days, MEA and the EAM have always been restricting their comments on what is happening inside that country. It's the domestic politics. Let us be honest, Sri Lankans don't understand.
I think it has been a fascinating conversation with you today, Mr. Moorthy. Hope to talk to you once again very soon on Sri Lanka. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today.